Welcome back to Life at 2030. We're so glad that you're with us today. Today we have Mom and Dad.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Hiya. You guys are so fun to be with. So, Dad, we were talking about on your bus how funny it is when you really thought you were alone, but you weren't. Some stuff that happened.
Yeah, sometimes you look back in your mirror and you don't see anybody, but there are certain places like right behind you that are hidden. And so in your mind, you kind of remember the people that got on and those that got off, and sometimes you think you're alone. And one time, I really had bad gas. It was terrible. And when I thought the last passenger got off, I just decided to just
Let it
relieve
go.
the gas out of my body. And about 2 blocks later, the bell rang.
Oh.
And a little old lady was sitting behind me, and she got off and says, "I hope you feel better, young man."
Oh. That is the best.
And the one that sticks out in my mind the most is I was teaching primary and I was learning the song Because I Have Been Given Much. And they had just put microphones, but we just bought some buses with microphones so we can make announcements inside and outside the bus. So I turned on the microphone and I started singing the song to remind me of the words. And I was blasting away at the song Because I Have Been Given Much. And it was about 10 minutes later. I was just approaching the end of the line and the buzzer rang.
Again.
And I'm like, huh? And it was another person sitting behind me, and they said, "Nice song, but keep your day job."
Oh.
He has a nice singing voice. Don't even be fooled by it.
But
Mom, would you want to be a fly on the wall in the bus listening to him just like rip it out on the microphone?
Yeah, but I'd probably start singing with him.
That's right. Actually, you're the wrong person to ask.
Mom sings responses.
You do. If I say the word peace, you could come up with a song that has peace in it, right?
Well, I'd have to be thinking about it. Would be probably a Christmas song with peace in it.
Probably. We should play that game once. Actually, I'm getting one. A game called Spontaneous.
Wow.
And everybody picks names or picks words, and then you see how many songs you can come up with it.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm totally playing that with you, Mom.
Okay. Will you be on my team?
Yeah, because we'll win.
I know.
Yeah, when we would have teenage friends come over, Mom would wash the dishes and you would just be singing.
I would just blast it out.
Because it made you happy.
And it embarrassed everybody too, and that's what you want to do as a parent sometimes.
Especially with 4 teenagers in the house and 4 of their friends.
Yes.
Then they will realize what you can do.
But I have to tell you, behind the scenes, most of my friends would say, "Your mom, I love how she just sings, and she doesn't even care."
And doesn't even care.
Because us, when we were teenagers, you're really just kind of worried about what other people think. And they loved that about you. Your mom doesn't care what anyone thinks. We need to be more like that. So today we want to talk about Dad's motorcycle accident, just how it changed everything. I want you to set up the background, give us the background of what you were doing at the time, what your plans were, what your family looked like.
At the time our son James was 6 months old, I was working at Chevron service station, and I was going to college at
The BYU school.
BYU school up in Salt Lake by LDS Hospital. There was a BYU extension up by LDS Hospital, and that's where I was going to school. And so we only had one car, so I decided to buy a motorcycle and ride the motorcycle up to school and back. And so Mom almost crashed on the motorcycle one day, and I watched her almost crash, and so that kind of worried me. But
she did one of those slick moves where she just almost crashed, but made it look really cool.
No, it didn't even make it look cool. It was scary.
I'm sorry, Mom.
But the day I crashed I was headed up to school. And I got on the motorcycle and I had attached my helmet to a little clip on the side. There were no helmet laws. There wasn't anything. But it felt so uncomfortable that I couldn't sit on the seat with the helmet clipped on, and I started the motorcycle up, and it just didn't feel comfortable. I adjusted it, and finally I thought, dang it, I'm just going to throw it on my head and get to school.
It was your future children, by the way, and grandchildren that were saying, no, wear your helmet, wear it.
So I took the helmet, put it on my head. I left the apartment, went down to 21st, turned the corner, and as I was approaching Richard Street, which is halfway down the street, a car turned left into me going into Richard Street. Come to find out, it was a girl. I used to date her sister. She lived on the end of our street. And she hit me, and I flew off the motorcycle and head first into the gutter. Had I not had the helmet on, because the helmet got a lot of damage, I would have probably been dead.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
And shattered my left femur and my tibia and fibula, and missed my ankle, missed my knee. The guy that was living in the house that I now own, Jim Bartlett, came out and gave me a blessing that they were putting me in an ambulance.
And about that time, somebody called me on the phone and told me that you'd been in an accident on Richard Street, and we only lived about a block away from that. And I came around, and I can't even remember if I guess I didn't ride in the ambulance. I took our car because I needed a way home, and I don't know who we gave Jim to tend, but like Dad said, he was only 6 months old, and worried and prayed all the way to the hospital.
So we went to the hospital at 57 South and 2nd East.
It was Old Cottonwood
Old
Hospital.
Cottonwood Hospital. And they ran me in the emergency room. The doctors were talking, and doctor said, we need to stretch your upper leg. He said, so we're going to drill a pin through the bone just below your knee so that we can stretch your upper leg so that the muscles don't contract the bones together. He said, but we don't know what internal injuries you have, so we can't give you any medication. So my dad had showed up by then, so they told me to hold my dad's hand while they drilled it through my knee, but the pain was so intense, I guess I passed out. I bent my dad's ring finger, the ring on his finger. I bent it, so he had to go home and get some pliers to bend it back.
Was that probably the worst part of the accident, was them having to drill?
No, the worst part was still coming, but I didn't know it.
And so Mom had met up with you at the hospital by then too?
I don't know how Mom got there.
Well, I had to have driven. Because I don't remember being in the ambulance with you, and so I went there, and they had taken you back in the back room, and I didn't know what was going on, and I'm so grateful I was not in the room where you squeezed your dad's hand so hard.
I don't think anyone wants to watch a doctor just drill
No.
something through someone with no pain meds.
Well, it was a long metal pin that went through so that they could hook the pulleys that held the weight.
Oh, okay.
So that it slowly stretched my legs so that the bones would line up so they could put a rod through it.
Well, they gave us a question. They said, do you want to just let your leg heal, or do you want to have surgery so it's the same length as the other one? You'll always walk with a limp if you don't have the surgery. And so we decided on the surgery. And we had to wait so that 3 days went by without him having a fever. And every time it came time for the 3 days, he'd get a fever and some kind of infection.
Because I had bones sticking out of my body.
Oh, wow.
So I kept getting infections.
So he was in the hospital. I think it was 49 days, but it could have been 39.
I think it was 49.
Because he kept getting a fever and he couldn't have the surgery.
So the first surgery they did was, the whole time I'm there, they've put me on morphine and Phenergan. And
I've never heard of Phenergan.
Phenergan is something to make the morphine last longer.
Okay. I don't know if they use that anymore. Do you know? Maybe?
I don't know. But the first surgery they did, they put a plate with some screws to hold my tibia and fibula together between my knee and my ankle. And before that surgery, I think they did that surgery pretty quick. And then I had to wait for a certain amount of time before they could do the next surgery.
With the fever that kept coming,
Right, with that, and just they wanted time for the leg to stabilize. They wanted time for the pulleys to stretch the leg, and because
then,
all the they said my upper leg was in like 19 pieces, and they would have to line it all up. And
did the bottom part of your leg, did that shatter?
yeah, that's why they had to put a metal plate against the bone and put all the pieces together and then screw them in line. So I had a long plate with a bunch of screws holding the bone pieces together.
Oh, wow. Where were you mentally at that point? Because,
Well, I was worried about my rent, my
yeah.
everything that, I had a wife and a child, and luckily the lady that hit me had good enough insurance that it paid my rent and
paid his wages.
paid my wages. And
Oh, that's a huge blessing.
Yes, it was. And so Jim was only 6 months old, and when he was healthy enough, I would bring him to the hospital to see Dad. And I still remember him hanging onto his trapeze that he would use to lift himself up. And Dad really loved having Jim there with us, and the nurses in the hospital did too. And we would always pray, and when I'd get home, I would call him, and they had just given him some morphine, and sometimes he just fell asleep while we were talking on the phone. But I missed him so very much every night.
But you got to see him every day.
Yes, I went every day.
So, Dad, tell me about the hospital room with all the
how many
guests in
people
there.
were in my room? 4?
I don't remember.
Sometimes.
Well, one guy was a parachute jumper, and his parachute didn't open. He broke every bone in his body.
I mean, he was in a body cast, and the nurse said, I want you to make sure that he doesn't fall out of bed. So they gave me a task of making sure he didn't fall out of bed. So here I'm worried about a guy in a full body cast next to me, not falling out of bed.
You can't exactly move either.
And then they brought a kid into the room who was having, I don't know what was wrong with him, but they wanted me to let them know if he ever left the bed and ran out of the room. So I'm watching the kid so he doesn't run away. And then a guy come in who was a policeman who his left leg kept going numb. So they wanted to make sure that if he was walking around, he didn't fall down. So I kind of became the policeman of the...
Oh, there was one more, an old man that wanted a catheter.
Oh, there was an old guy that was asking for a catheter.
He didn't want to get out of bed.
He didn't
to go
want to
the
get out of
bathroom.
bed to go to the bathroom.
That's the last thing you ask for.
And I'm like, no, you're crazy.
And then there was a suicidal kid too, right?
Yeah. Well, I was there quite a while, so I had a lot of people come through my room.
You did.
There was another kid there, really young, that had done something to his head, and they had to do the same thing with his head as they did your leg with the weights.
They had weight. Oh,
What?
because he had a halo on his head. He'd broken his neck.
Oh.
And so they had this halo that was pulling his neck up, stretching it so the bones wouldn't compress on the spine.
Wow. That sounds crazy.
Well, all in all, it made me feel better about what I was going through.
That must have been hard watching so many people come in and out of your room
Oh, yeah.
that they finally get to go.
Yeah, but the more I look at it, the more these experiences train me to be a bishop and a bus driver
Taught you a lot of patience
because I was a mechanic at the time,
Oh yeah.
and it was because of this accident that I had to change my profession because I couldn't, because of the loss of blood vessels in my leg, I couldn't stand for long periods of time.
So you were in the hospital for how many days?
49 days.
That is a lot of time. And how was your you actually had an obnoxious nurse.
Well,
A trainee.
I have a 20-pound weight hanging from this screw that's going through my knee, and it's pulling my upper leg. So when it goes through a pulley and then hangs down, so there's always pressure pulling that. And when they come to change my bed, they would move my tray over and put that weight on the tray so that I could move side to side so they could change my bed. I wouldn't get out of bed. I would just roll to the left and then roll to the right. And all the medication I was on, they would bring a bedpan in once a week and give me an enema just to clean out my bowels. Because with all the medication, you don't think you have to go to the bathroom.
Right, and you couldn't move anyway, so
Right, so it was a cold bedpan once a week, and because I'm hooked up to this contraption, there isn't much I can do. And they were training new nurses from the BYU nursing school and from the nursing schools around, and that week there were BYU nurses that were there working, and she left my weight on the table when they finished making the bed, and she left. And as she was leaving, I said, "Hey, you forgot my weight." So she came back and she just pushed it off the little table. And it hung about 3 feet below that. So when the full weight hit the string and it yanked my knee, I thought it was ripping it out of the bone. And it hurt so bad I was throwing books at her, and I threw a flower vase at her, and she went flying out of the room, and the head nurse came in and, "What's going on?" And I said, "My weight was on that," and she pushed it off. She's like, "She what?" So she came and checked my bolts, and they were bleeding from both ends.
Oh. Ouch.
And so she cleaned them up and put new packing over them, and she said, "You won't see her again."
So I'm glad you didn't have to have surgery again from that.
Oh, really?
That would have been a nightmare.
A 20-pound bag of sand is pretty heavy.
And they were really nice people. I don't know what she was thinking. I don't know if she knew exactly what it was, or
Or if it was just going to hit the ground instead.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. How was your recovery at home? Because you released.
Oh, wait, he's not done.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Well, between every surgery, they took you off morphine.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would wake up with cold sweats, seeing things crawling on the walls and the ceilings, and like spiders were crawling all over my body, and I was literally an addict to the pain medication.
Because they had you on it for the entire time, right?
Yeah. And so I learned then that addiction is an evil thing. And so even now, if I have to take high-powered medications, I only take it for as long as I absolutely need it, and then I'm done.
Right. And also in the hospital, when you're on those high powered drugs and you're just not feeling good, you can't exactly focus on the TV or try to read a book
No.
because your mind is so fuzzy. And so that must have seemed like a really long time for you.
And food, you can't taste food. Mom would smuggle food in, and it tasted just like hospital food.
He wanted a hamburger from McDonald's, and when he started eating it, he said, "I can't eat this." Just nothing tasted good to him.
So that's why the hospitals get the bad rap for food, is it's the medication that's
Right.
all in them.
It's not the food. It's that you don't feel like eating. I mean, the last time I was in the hospital, my grandson ate my dinner
Yeah, when you were
as he
there
watched a helicopter take off.
That's right. You were there for sepsis. That was 2
Yeah.
years ago? Something
I don't
like
know,
that.
a couple of years ago.
So do you have any more with the hospital, with any of your surgeries? Did you eventually had surgery, right?
Yeah, I had a rod put in the upper,
Went
Part-
right down the middle of his bone.
Right down the middle of my
his
bone.
femur.
and it stuck out a little at the top. So sometimes when I would walk, it would pop on my muscle.
Oh, weird.
Or if Mom and I got frisky, sometimes it would pop.
So when you had that rod taken out, the doctor gave it to you.
He gave it to
And
me.
you had it in a drawer for the longest time, and sometimes you'd threaten to spank us kids.
Yeah, I'd spank you,
with that
threaten to
funky
spank
rod.
you kids with my rod.
Like, how weird is that for Dad to threaten to spank us with this thing that was in his body? I don't know what ended up happening to it.
I don't know
but
where
just-
it ended up.
Maybe one of us accidentally threw it away.
But they had to take it out because it was blocking my bone marrow from growth.
So it had done its job. And
Right.
then
And he said sometimes we can't get them out.
how long was it until they took it out?
5, 6, 7 years. Maybe.
Oh, really?
I don't.
No, I think it was only a year and a
Okay.
half.
I don't remember.
It seemed like 5 or 6
Yeah.
years.
It does.
So here you are being released from the hospital, and the full weight of you still had to recover. I
Right.
mean,
Rehab was pushing my son down to the service station and talking to the guys down there and sitting on the freezer and pushing my son back and forth over the steel grates and putting him to sleep.
was that really weird going to your old job to talk with all your buddies and realize I can't do this anymore?
Yeah.
Oh, he may
Well,
have-
I
he may
went
have
back to work,
started.
but I realized that I couldn't stand for long periods of time. And the doctor told me there's a good chance by the time I'm 60, the blood flow could get to a point where I'd lose my leg.
Well, see, here you are, 68, and your leg seems to be doing okay.
Yeah, and I had a low-grade infection for a long, long time. They called it a World War II infection, where soldiers, their bones would be sticking out, and a low-grade infection in their bones, they could never get rid of it. And it would come back periodically, and
And you would start shaking. You'd have the chills.
I'd have the chills. My leg would swell up,
And then you would have this weird red line that would kind of go up your leg.
Yeah.
And I was so scared as a kid because once I think you told me that you heard that the red line had reached someone's heart and then they died because the infection
Right,
reached
that
their
was-
heart.
and finally I went to a specialist, and he said, what we're going to have you do is we're going to have you go to an Instacare, and they're going to give you an IV twice a day. So I went and got an IV twice a day. It was for a week and a half. And he said, we're going to intensely go after this infection. And he says, but there are some parts of the infection that will never go away, like cellulitis.
Right.
And that's what caused the leg to swell. So
yeah, it would swell. You'd get a fever. You'd have the chills. You
So
just were miserable.
we finally got rid of the infection, but the cellulitis just stayed.
It doesn't seem to come back as often.
No,
though.
not near as often now.
Well, because the minute Dad's leg starts hurting, I intently rub it, and it always seems to take care of that.
Because it hurts like heck when she rubs it so hard. So. It's kind of like the cough medicine Grandpa used to give you. You didn't want to cough after he gave you some.
So, Dad, I want you to tell us about some of the tender mercies with the accident and with your healing and just anything you can think of.
Well,
Your mother and Dad were there a lot
Mom and Dad came often.
and lifted him. Lifted him spiritually and lifted his soul. And they were there. They did everything they could to help him and us. I appreciated that so very much. And all of the people that tended Jim the times that he couldn't go to the hospital because he had a little cold and they didn't want him to come when he was, had a runny nose. And so I couldn't bring him all the time.
Jim was a mama's boy. He didn't like to stay with anybody but Mama.
Oh, bless his heart. Well, that was hard because he was so tiny.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's the obvious tender mercy with your helmet where it
Right.
was not comfortable except on your head.
Before that day, I would have just left the helmet there and just gone to school. That was the first time it ever felt uncomfortable. And I couldn't find a spot where it worked. It was because it was meant to be on there.
You were meant to live, Dad.
Yes.
Yeah, you had lots of kids to raise still.
And the fact that Jim was there to give me a blessing, Jim Bartlett.
Yeah,
And
I'm glad he came out and did that.
the fact that they had the insurance to help us with rent.
And your cousin that had passed away shortly after, well,
Steve came
yes.
by to see me, yeah. And then he came by to see us one day, and was it that night? He said he was going dancing, and he died on the dance floor of an enlarged heart.
and he was your best friend. That was so
Yeah,
hard on you.
he was in and out of the Army, so he wasn't my best friend, but Steve and I were close. We had a good time.
So, Dad, how did your life, and Mom, how did your life look like after the accident?
Well, it changed for the better in that I had to find a job that was long term.
But the benefits of the UTA were so wonderful
And-
that we had never had
And
insurance.
a member in our ward said, "Why don't you go and drive bus?" And so I went down and applied, and they hired me in 1979.
On my second birthday in Sherry's.
Yep, and
Yep.
I started driving bus, and I used to take a guy, and he got fired for not showing up all the time, and it was really hard to begin with because I did something that I swore that I would never do, but I looked at the long-term implications of working on Sunday. Because when you first start out,
You don't have a
the
choice.
shifts, you have to work what you have to work, but it wasn't very long. It was less than a year that I didn't have to work Sunday. So 1 year out of 39 years wasn't much.
Right. And then you'd miss so much of school with being in the hospital and everything.
Right, I never got back to school.
Well, we wanted to, but with the split shift at UTA, there was hardly a time. They didn't have college online like they do now, or he would have been able to finish up.
I think you would have, for sure.
But the job was so good, and one of the reasons that I stayed was the insurance. I mean, the insurance and the retirement was
It was,
I
it
mean,
was worth it.
now I make like I was working, and it's a great retirement. And
Would you have done anything different in regards of the aftermath of the accident?
I don't know what I would have done different. Maybe gone back to school, made a concerted effort to get a better education. But, sometimes schooling just interferes with your education. And it's not like, little did I know that all these experiences were training me for what the Lord wanted me to do.
Yeah, and all your callings.
Because if I hadn't have had the experiences with out of control people and people, because basically a bus driver is a mobile bartender bishop. Everybody tells you their problems. You're one guy that can't run away because you got a steering wheel attached to you.
How many times did you wish you could just walk off the bus?
Lots of times. And so, everything that happened for a reason.
I believe that for sure. I'm curious. So we know that you have had bouts of cellulitis and that low-grade infection for years and years. What other things what's happened with your body since, with your mind, physical?
I gained a lot of weight laying around for 2 years, and I've never been able to get rid of it. Because sometimes exercise just makes my leg worse with the lack of circulation.
And we have too many goodies around.
And I've never been able to come to terms with that. So I just kind of look at it as taking advice from the doctor. The doctor told me to get in shape, and so I've chosen round as a shape.
There you go.
You put it out in front of you.
And the doc said to watch your weight, so it's right out here where I can see it all the time. So,
see, now with your mind too, I'm sad for you that you've lost a lot of memories.
Yeah, I did lose a lot of. I don't remember grade school and a lot of my early years. I did take a good whack on the head.
Yeah, helmets can only do so much, right?
Right.
I'm just glad that it didn't affect you.
And we had a really good helmet, and it took damage a lot.
I'm glad you were okay from that.
And the funny thing that happened? The lady that hit me and my wife both had twins at the same time.
No, hers were a little older.
But we both had twins. So the accident shook something loose.
I admire this too. You could have easily tried to sue this lady and you decided not to. Tell me a little bit about that.
I don't know. We just decided that they were going through some marital problems anyway. And I just didn't feel like suing was the way to go.
So we asked the doctor what he felt like was a good settlement, and he told us, and we took it. And most of it became a down payment for our house. And you used to have a down payment. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes
when
you
we
just
bought
get
our
in
house,
free.
you were required to put 20% down.
Yep.
So
you had enough.
It got us into our house, and that's really all.
So
the insurance company, that's just. It wasn't in us. We just never felt like that was the way to go.
Yeah, and you got to stay in the same ward.
And they stayed married, and they're happy, and so are we.
And we've never held any grudge against her.
And I bought the
Never.
house of the guy that gave me a blessing.
It was meant to be. Yeah.
And I see that street every day where I got hit. I see that gutter every day where I got
Well,
hit.
you don't think about that every
But I don't
time.
think about it.
That's weird, though, that's right where... Yeah, now you don't even think about turning left out of that street because it's so
Nope.
busy.
That's where my daughter hit a guy, though.
Yeah, that's where I hit a guy.
He walked
He
away.
flew off and hit the gutter. He didn't have a helmet. So overall, what was your main takeaway from this accident? Unless I don't think
Gratitude for life.
I mean, I survived, and that was a
grateful
good
for
thing.
the things that didn't happen, and that we learned from the things that did happen.
I guess the best takeaway is that the bike was totaled, and I never bought another one since.
Which, by the way, what kind of motorcycle was that?
It was a Kawasaki 250 Enduro.
What color?
Green.
Green.
Lime green.
Lime green.
Yes.
It was
How did she
beautiful.
not see you? Was she reading that book sitting on the bus?
She never said. She cut across 3 lanes of traffic to hit me. So
Oh, she was coming right for you, Dad.
yeah, she had a mission. No, I don't know. I never asked her. I never. In fact, her and I never met. I mean, we never talked until I think I went up to their house in Bountiful.
Yeah, I don't think you've ever even said her name, and I won't ask it.
No, that doesn't really matter.
Nope.
I mean it.
It doesn't.
Yeah, that wasn't the point. That wasn't the point at all in telling the story.
We survived and she survived, and that's all that matters.
Yep, and it kept us in McKinley Ward, where we've had experiences galore with some very amazing people.
I don't regret buying that house. It was intended to be a starter home, and that's why we bought it. As our family grew, we wanted to buy a bigger house, but as our family grew, that's what we could afford, and
that's where you are still. And that's okay.
and how many people can say they've been in one house their whole married life?
Not
Well,
so
we
much
were-
anymore.
Well, I mean, we were in 3
Well,
places.
We were there, moved about 3 times till we
So-
got there.
Does Selena know that you rented the house that
Yeah.
she owns?
Yeah.
So you were in the basement apartment, and then you
Then the
rented.
Bingham's home on West Temple, and then while we were at the Bingham's home, we bought our house.
So you were living at the Bingham's home when? No, that was after the
No,
accident.
we were in the apartment when the
Yeah, we were
accident
still in
happened.
the
Okay, that's
basement
right.
apartment
And then the Binghams asked us to move into their house.
while they served a mission.
And it was at that time that I finished all my surgeries and we settled with the insurance company.
That's so neat.
So Jim Bartlett's house came up for sale and we bought it. And then the Andersons rented from us. And that's where Jeff Pickett met his wife,
Sherry.
Oh.
Sherry Anderson, because they rented our house and moved into our ward.
And then they stayed in the ward for many years too.
Yeah.
That's so neat, you guys. It's definitely a small world.
Yep.
And it matters how we treat each other and just how we are.
I don't regret anything. I mean, really.
That's very good.
You can look back on it and say I should have done this and I should have done this, but
And we can do that with so many
Who
experiences.
can't say that they wish they'd done something different.
Right. That's so right. So I like how you guys looked at what didn't happen and that there were blessings amongst all of your trials and the right people were sent at the right time. And I'm glad you're here on this earth, Dad and Mom, both of you. And thank you for talking about this. I know that was
Anytime.
kind of hard. You were saying, can we just talk about something else?
well, there are things that are hard to talk about. Because in your own mind, you don't think anybody really cares about that.
If it helped somebody along their way, then we're happy about that.
Yeah, because there could be someone listening that's going through a trial and just know that they'll get through it and to look at what didn't happen and to know that it will get better somehow, right?
Everything always works out somehow.
Well, guys, thanks for coming today and telling us your experiences. And I'm glad I wasn't there.
You
That
were
would've been
there.
hard.
You were still inside of Mom then.
I was bothering you with something else other than the
Amen.
helmet. Well, we will see you guys next time.
All righty. It's a pleasure.
Take
Love
care,
you guys.
everybody. Bye.
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 Bye.